I tricked Sam Bankman-Fried into a third interview with me, and this time he may have admitted to fraud. You'll be the judge. You can click to this timestamp if you just want to listen to the interview, but I want to explain the background, the strategy that went into this call to try to learn where others had failed, including, by the way, learning from my own failures interviewing Sam. Now, first, I want to give some background. Sam at no point has wanted to talk to me. Every time I've kind of snuck on these Q&As and started peppering
I just cannot believe Sam continues to get these Q&As and continue to interact directly with human beings. Like, one of the biggest frauds of all time, and he is still perfectly content to try and pretend that he's not and just talk to people. Just constantly talking to people about it. Being super open. It's wild. I mean, I guess I'm glad that he's that open about it, because maybe that'll eventually lead to charges against him, since for some reason they don't want to pursue charges against him, even though it was billions of dollars worth of fraud. So maybe as he continues to put his own ass in his face, maybe then they'll be motivated enough to go after him, but it blows my mind that he continues to do this. Sam Bankman-Fried, that is.
Usually leaves, but I realized that since this was my third time basically doing the exact same trick, it was probably going to be one of my last, because at some point he was going to catch on. So I knew going into this, it might be my last chance to interview Sam. And because of that, I had to think long and hard about what the perfect line of questioning would be to really pin Sam down.
Ask him why he's hard stuck bronze in league.
Dodging questions. He's done it with everybody so far, including me, by the way. And I mean, look, I think we've got some great stuff, but to this point, I didn't think anyone had gotten that smoking gun. He always denies everything. He always has a sort of a loophole out of it. So I'd have to try a different tactic. And here was my plan. Sam's whole excuse about not being a con man all hinges around Alameda Research. Basically, he says he knew nothing of what was going on there because he was the CEO of FTX. And while that's nearly impossible to believe that he's this stupid or incompetent, it's really hard to prove 100%. So I realized if we were going to do this, I'd have to remove Alameda from my case, right? I needed to show that Sam had knowingly defrauded people without invoking Alameda at any point. And here was my plan to do it. I was going to spend the entire time laser focused on the FTX terms of service. Now, some of you may know FTX lays out that
interesting
they cannot
strategy.
use customer funds for anything. They can't trade with them. They can't loan them out. And I thought this was a really important point because obviously that money is no longer there. So clearly something must have happened. But I'm far from the first person to notice this. Many people, including myself, have already tried to ask him about
he called
this
it
and
out
pin him
already.
down, but for various reasons, well, it didn't work. And I needed to learn why so we could avoid it. So I want to go through a few major interviews with Sam and show why this line of questioning has always fallen apart, starting with the New York Times.
In terms of service for FTX, and I just want to read you this. It says, none of the digital assets in your account are the property of or shall or may be loaned to FTX Trading. FTX Trading does not represent or treat digital assets in users' accounts as belonging to FTX Trading. So how is it possible that Alameda had this loan of
God, he just looks like such a villain.
So there's that piece from the terms of service, but there were a number of other parts of the terms of service and a number of other parts of the platform on top of that. There is the borrow lending facility, where users were lending billions of dollars of assets to each other, collateralized by assets on the exchange. You had obviously...
Yeah, but why do you suck so much ass at League?
Now, of course, all of this, it's meant to be the case that these are positions where FTX could, if it needed to, margin call those positions and close them down in time such that it would cover all of those, all those shorts, all those liabilities. Obviously, that wasn't the case here, and that's a massive failure of oversight, of risk management, and of...
it's such a fucking frustrating defense to listen to. So instead of admitting to fraud, because obviously he's not dumb enough to just blatantly admit to fraud, until now, I guess, with the Coffeezila interview, instead of admitting to anything, he blames it all on, I'm just a fucking imbecile. Like I am actually the dumbest man of all time. This was a failure on every level because I'm so fucking stupid. How quirky with my dumb, smooth brain Haha, how dumb. I'm just so dumb. I can't believe we did this. We were so stupid and short-sighted to do this. His defense is, I am just a fucking moron. That is his whole defense. I'm not a criminal. I'm not a fraud. I'm just the dumbest man on this entire planet. It's so frustrating. It's so frustrating. There's some meatloaf, beak, and bats.
Responsibility from myself running FTX.
Because he is stupid. Like, don't get me wrong. I'm not gonna call this man smart. He is like observably dumb. But he is also a con man. He is a fraud. He knowingly committed crimes. Like, that's not some accidental thing that was a byproduct of being a fucking actual buffoon. It's because he is a con man criminal.
But just make this very straight. Was there commingling of funds? That's what it appears like. It appears like there's been a genuine commingling of the funds that are of FTX customers that were not supposed to be commingled with your separate firm.
I didn't knowingly commingle funds.
Okay, Sorkin tried and failed here to pin him down on the terms of service. Why? Well, because Sam escapes in this talk about a different part of the terms of service, which related to margin trading, where you take out some kind of a loan. And in a way, it was a complete deflection.
Tier 1
like,
musket,
it doesn't
Tier
matter
1
that there's a separate margin
ninja,
trading terms of service, because the people
Prime
who weren't margin trading
Taurus
still should have had their funds kept safe. But it sort of threw Sorkin off track. And so now we're going to move to the Stephanopoulos interview, which was a bit better because Sam's going to try the margin trading story. But watch Stephanopoulos. He does a better job at honing in on the question.
But as you know, the FTX terms of service
Yep.
tell the people who signed up, none of the digital assets in your account are the property of or shall be or may be loaned to FTX trading.
Oh, I got it
You're
wrong
saying
again.
that happened.
My understanding is a few things happen. The first is there is a margin trading facility on FTX.
Is it
by
Bing?
which users
Thanks for the
can
resub.
lend out funds, by which other users borrow funds. And so there are explicit cases where there is, margin extended, where there is borrow lending.
If Alameda is borrowing the money that belongs
Yep.
to FTX depositors, that's a bright red line, isn't it?
There are a lot of cases where that's actually explicitly part of the programs and that are
But
happening.
not
and people
here.
are
Here it
opting.
says that the digital assets may not be loaned to FTX trading. They can't be loaned out.
Jesus. Just listening to the way he conducts himself, holy fuck, it is so grating. There is no man that is more, annoying than Sam Bankman-Fried. Oh my lord. And this is nothing compared to that video they made about him calling them the world's most generous billionaire. He repeats it to himself like he's a child in class trying to struggle to read something out loud. Ugh. Oh, did I write that? No, that couldn't have been there. You can't loan to FTX. No. Oh, just another failure. Man, we're so goofy. We're so stupid. I can't believe we did. We wrote that? Oh my god. Well, it wasn't on purpose. We're just dumb. You can't throw me in jail for being dumb.
There
It's like on Who Wants to Be a
existed
Millionaire.
borrow lending facility on FTX. And I think that's probably covered, I don't remember exactly where, but somewhere else in the terms of service.
But they'd have to approve of that. They're saying they didn't approve of it here. They're saying you approved of it.
Now, this is great stuff from Stephanopoulos. He refocused the question, but Sam's about to weasel out with the new trick. Go ahead and watch.
If
Crying.
you rewind
He cries.
to the beginning of
Imagine.
FTX, where some customers were I think in line with sort of existing relationships that they've had, at least in some cases, wiring money straight to Alameda Research in order to trade on FTX.
So you do know, and you did know, that FTX deposits were being funneled to Alameda.
So I was vaguely aware that that was how some wires were being sent in the first place.
Didn't that set off alarm bells in your head?
Oh, don't give him a way out. This is throwing him a softball at the end. He was doing a great job, but yeah, I definitely see how SBF gets his way out of this one. He squeaks it out, little stinker. I was too busy playing League of Legends, and I was only vaguely aware of crimes or something related to illegal activity or the violation of our own terms. You know how much I play League, right? Because I am Bronze 3, and I just must have been so distracted or on tilt that day. Oh my god. I should have paid more attention. I'm so silly. I can't believe I've done this.
So there are a lot of people who are involved in that process. And look, I really deeply wish that I had taken like a lot more responsibility for understanding what the details were of what was going on there.
This is how he slips out again.
Yep.
He tried the margin trading explanation. It didn't work. So he pivots to, okay, well, there's this weird backstory where FTX used to take wires from Alameda. And maybe that's where we lost the money, right? It's another smokescreen. But unfortunately, it kind of hamstrung the conversation. And if I was going to succeed, I'd have to beat that explanation. And in the first couple interviews I did with Sam, I tried to go with like this insider angle, where insiders I had talked to had told me something very different, but it didn't work. Go ahead and watch.
There's sort of all this talk about the terms of service. Did you break terms of service? Did you not? You're basically claiming that there was this separate side of your terms of service. But I talked to somebody from Alameda and asked how big the position of like, or how many people had assets in the type of accounts that terms of service would apply to versus the regular terms of service, which said you couldn't use their money. And they said it was about $1 billion that was in the margin trading or the margin like side of things where you could reuse their funds or whatever. And there was the rest of it was not there. So it seems like you're putting all your eggs behind this one excuse about, you know, there was this separate side of the terms of service. How do you address everyone else?
So I don't have all the data in front of me. My memory is that it was substantially more than $1 billion. I can't verify that. On top of that, there were other effects as well. Some of those were early wire transfers sent directly to Alameda.
Yeah, I kind of got stuck where Stephanopoulos roughly got stuck. I should have known that he was just going to refuse the evidence of insiders and just say, well, I disagree, and go back to his Alameda wire explanation. And I tried following it up.
To be fair, though, I think Coffeezilla's angle there was a smart one to play, but you're going up against a guy who's trying to be like I don't know, still trying to maintain that altruism almost, where he's like, I'm so open and honest, like everything collapsed, everything failed, but it's because of some shortcomings that I did out of, you know, a misunderstanding and a couple of mistakes along the way. I'm still young, I'm still learning, still time to grow, and then busting out an interpretive dance apology. So it's just like a really hard position to argue against. Thanks to the Prime Fire and the resub Noto and 40AF.
Up a bit, but it didn't really matter. I had kind of missed my shot on that particular angle. And as I reflected on this, I realized all of the talk about margin trading, future trading, wire transfers to Alameda, all of it is a smokescreen from the big problem. The big problem is that some percentage of FTX's customer base never sent a wire to Alameda. They never signed up to margin trading. They never did spot margin. All they did was put their assets on the platform, and they were told that their assets would not be borrowed, it would not be loaned out, and that money would always be there. And it wasn't there. Why wasn't it there? There's no other way to explain that. If the money's not there, then fraud. And I had to laser in on that one point, not get distracted by these shiny objects that Sam's throwing up about this or that, or what about this, what about that? No, there's only one question that matters, and it's impossible for him to answer, I thought. So that was my strategy going into it. That was the backstory and how I learned from previous interviews. So without further ado, here's my third and probably final call with Sam Bankman-Fried.
I'm going to tell you right now, this is not going to be the final call. Sam Bankman-Fried's going to go on another goddamn Twitter live stream with strangers yet again. And Coffeezila can just get in there and interview him again if he wants. Like, for some reason, this fucking guy is so addicted to doing interviews about his, like, scam. Like, it blows my mind. It actually blows my mind.
I'm about to go up.
Okay, Coffee, you're up.
Hey, Sam, it's me again. I just wanted to ask real quick about the terms of service question, which Rec brought up a little bit. I want to expound on it. Can you just tell us, yes or no, were you treating client assets just on the regular digital asset side different from the margin trading side?
I do think we're treating them differently. There were a bunch of different sides. There were more than two sides there. But I do think that we
Please give some Revolucio and give some Waflix.
That we were cognizant of the fact that like there were differences between uses for like, you know, margin versus staking versus spot versus futures collateral versus other things.
Yeah, just people. I'm just talking about people just putting Bitcoin on the exchange.
Yeah.
Obviously, there was really clear terms of service around that. If it's true that you didn't invest client assets, not even in treasuries, as you said via a now deleted tweet, why do those client assets no longer exist?
So
Repeat the question. I'm in a mid lane
I'm trying
battle
to
right
trace
now.
through some of this. Here's my best guess, and I wish I could give you a more confident answer, but I don't have the data. But my best guess is basically it's a combination of the following. One piece is the transfer sent directly to Alameda Research from customers. One piece, and that I think is a fairly substantial piece. One piece is.
Wait, can you explain what that piece means? So people were sending money to Alameda instead of they were getting credited on FTX, and Alameda just ended up using those funds, and they were never held separately per the terms of service.
Well, there was a separate legal agreement with that. I don't know the details of it. I don't have it in front of me, but
God, it's every question you ask him. It's like, well, I'm actually really not sure what you're talking about, but if I had to guess, like as if you didn't own the company, like you didn't make the company. Like it's like asking your dad, who only like read the headlines about FTX, these questions. Like that's his responses. I don't actually know where this could have gone. If I had to, spitball and, give you a ballpark, it probably went into Kmart stock. Like, Jesus Christ.
there's a separate legal agreement with respect to transfers that were sent directly to Alameda Research by users, especially before FTX had its own bank accounts. And so I do think that is part of what happened there, likely.
Let's focus on only client assets that happened after FTX got a bank. Y'all said digital assets are treated a very specific way. Why were those digital assets not treated that way?
So of the remaining piece, and there's a few
I can
other
feel him
pieces as
sweating.
well, around features and other things. I understand that's not what you're talking about. For the ones that you are talking about, right? For the ones that were left, and I'm just taking a stab at this because I don't have the data. My best guess is the following: is that there were a lot of those assets remaining. We processed something like $5 or $6 billion, I think, of withdrawals over the few days prior to, or I guess the few days during the crash, and there are still a few $1 billion of those remaining, I think, in the estate. And so you put those together, you have many billions of dollars of those assets. But I think, and so that's part of the answer, is that
you're getting so lost in the
of
sauce. This is
actual
such a
assets there.
blatant
I
placate
there's
attempt
one
here to get
follow-up
off of
question you
this.
probably still have there, which is, well, how about people who didn't withdraw and were also in that bucket? And part of the answer is, well, there still do exist some number of billions of dollars of assets, of hard assets in the estate.
No, is there one-to-one assets? Because that's the whole thing. We're talking about a separation of funds. So those funds should be in a different place, in a different wallet than everybody else. What you talked about, servicing billions of dollars of withdrawals, has nothing to do with those specific
Literally
digital
nothing.
assets, because that's just first come, first serve, whoever pulled out first. We're talking about people who never agreed to have their funds loaned out, who never agreed to have their funds put on margin. They should have, according to your terms of service, one-to-one backing. It should all still be in some bucket somewhere. And are you confident today, as the CEO of FTX, this has nothing to do with Alameda, are you confident today to say that those are absolutely real and they exist and they're present, people are backed one-to-one on client digital assets?
His response is going to be, well, what terms of service? I don't really know what that means, but if I had to wager a foggy stab in the dark, for those that don't understand the line of questioning Coffeezila is going for, he's focusing in on like a really core component to this, where there's people like, back to this, like your dad heard about FTX. He saw that Super Bowl commercial with Larry David. He's like, yeah, I think I'm out. Don't be like Larry. Put your money in FTX. It's a great, safe, wonderful thing. So he just puts his money in there. He doesn't agree to do any like margins. He doesn't agree to anything else. He just wants his money in there. And according to FTX, that money would always be there, 1-to-1. It wouldn't go to anywhere else. It wouldn't go to Alameda. It wouldn't go anywhere you would have it. It would just be there. But that's not the case, clearly. That ended up not being the case. They know, it appears, all of that is gone.
So I think, and again, I'm just taking a stab here, but I think
almost verbatim what I just said he would say
is that if you look at especially a lot of the withdrawals that happened, those withdrawals were not necessarily only coming from people who never used margin trading or futures or staking or anything else. Those weren't just withdrawals from people who were keeping 1-to-1 backed, or were sort of just keeping them as pure spot balances, and it was omnibus wallets between the various categories, and so I think that the answer to your question is that a number of those assets were withdrawn by people who had balances on the exchange, potentially in the few days prior to the collapse. And if you wanted to think about it this way, it could be that that happened, and then when the collapse sort of completed, that effectively meant that there was, if you wanted to put it this way, like fungibility created during those withdrawals between assets for people who had and had not been using.
But that means that there is no separation of funds. If there's fungibility between two different buckets of category, there are no buckets. It's just one bucket. Everyone's taking out of the bucket, which... This
really seems like SBF is tossing out buzzwords that he doesn't even understand himself. Like that, this is rough. This is pretty rough. And it's made even worse by the I think, maybe. Well, I don't really know.
Which means substantially anyone who had your terms of service with digital assets wasn't actually subject to that terms of service. They were subject to the same terms of service of your margin trading, right? Which is your more risky product. So you subjected everyone to the higher risk product because fundamentally, when it came down to it, you're saying there's fungibility. It's $1 here, $1 there. Everyone can take out $1 as fast as they want. Don't you see that as like defrauding your customers, the people who trusted you to just say, hey, this is not going to go anywhere except for we're not investing your assets? If I can exchange 1-to-1 and I'm the one who put risky stuff on with risky assets with risky terms of service, I can take the money that someone who didn't sign up to those same risky terms didn't agree to. Isn't that fraud?
Well, yes, I think.
I'm specifically talking about what happened in the days immediately during and following the crash, in that 3 or so day period, and during that period, I think we may have allowed just generalized withdrawals. I think that was if you're saying,
do you not realize what you're saying right now?
Withdrawals for everyone who had an open futures position, for clawback potential or something like that. I don't know, maybe that would have been the right thing to do. I hear where you're coming from on that. I felt, at the time, that, we wanted to treat customers equally. It was an incredible...
But they had agreed to different things, so you can't treat them equally.
Yeah, like he's trying... Oh my God, he's trying to take this angle like everyone's equal here. But like you have different areas of investment, like the risky assets. I put in for these terms, it's risky, I get that. I accept that risk. But then you have the people, like Coffeezila is focusing on, I don't want to do the risky shit, I just want this 1-to-1, I want it to sit there, I just want it to be 1-to-1, nothing else. And SBF is just admitting, well, actually, everyone played by the same rules. Like, they didn't make a distinction, there's no separation. Thus, fraud. Fucking fraud. It's just that simple.
It's like, this is the whole problem of the story of FTX and Alameda, is all the funds were being commingled. Isn't this just another story of commingling funds, except this is now FTX, which you can't pass the blame to Alameda anymore. This is your company, your funds, that you are treating all the clients the same when they clearly signed up to different terms of service.
So I just want to respond to that. And please, I completely respect your question, but you have monopolized all of these discussions, Coffeezila. You need to let others speak, and you need to respond to what I'm saying and not grandstand as much here. I completely understand where you're coming from. But to answer your question, I didn't make a decision there. We processed withdrawals as we normally do until it became clear we couldn't anymore, at which point we shut them off. And it was the case that, like, at that point, there was a big liquidity hole. That's what happened. If you want to judge that process and think that, like, we should have been spending those days frantically trying to code up a new withdrawal process, I disagree with you, but I understand where you're coming from.
Yeah, sure. I think that's fine. I mean, it's not about coding up a new withdrawal process. It's about treating your client assets the way you told them they'd be treated, right? It's a very different thing.
It's super simple.
Completely. But anyways, I'll stop grandstanding for Sam. Thanks, guys. Oh my gosh.
I legitimately, truly believe SBF doesn't even realize what kind of conversation he just had. I actually think he has no clue what he was even talking about, like, or the ramifications of what he was saying. I am truly convinced he actually just doesn't know.
Woo! Oh my gosh. Wow. We got the call out. We got the shout out. All right. You can probably tell I was pretty excited about that because I finally got what I was looking for. A straight answer on the problem of funds.
With
right?
1,000
Sam
ums
explicitly
surrounding
says
it.
that FTX was not separating funds. They were allowing generalized withdrawals. The dollars were fungible from different buckets. You can't do that. We finally dodged all the BS about margin trading, about Alameda wires. We finally got to the heart of it, which is that there are no funds left over for the people who just should have had their funds separated because they never separated them from the beginning. They were always seemingly commingled. And although Sam wouldn't necessarily agree that they were always commingled, the proof is in the pudding. FTX owes billions of dollars that they do not have. Yep. And it's because of how they allowed withdrawals. To give you kind of a regular finance analogy about why this is so cataclysmically bad, and in my opinion, fraud. Imagine you banked at JP Morgan Chase.
Not even your opinion. It is just fraud. It is just fraud.
Savings account.
It's more than an opinion. It's just fraud.
Then you find out that they actually had this risky hedge fund. And you know what? They actually kind of blew up. In fact, they blew up so badly that JP Morgan Chase, it's all shutting down. But when you go to the bank to withdraw your money, you find out that instead of keeping your money safely in your savings account, they had allowed the people in the hedge fund business to just withdraw it, you know, first come, first serve, right? They treated all clients the same, according to them. Well, you say, well, no, that's fraud because you signed up to very different terms of service than the guy who knew he was going to be like, you know, in this hedge fund, right? He had a different level of risk. He acknowledged that level of risk. And if you just throw all the money in one pot, the terms of service are meaningless, right? You're exposed to the same level of risk as the guy who took on huge risk. And that's fundamentally what happened at FTX. That's fraud. They told people their money was safe, and ultimately, they just subjected everyone to the same risk as like the day trading degenerate gambler on 100x leverage. And I really found the last thing Sam told me like so telling.
To answer your question, I didn't make a decision there. We processed withdrawals as we normally do.
God.
That's what happened. If you want to judge that process and think that like we should have been spending those days frantically trying to code up a new withdrawal process, I disagree with you, but I understand where you're coming from.
This is so interesting because no, of course I don't think you should be coding up a new withdrawal process while you're going bankrupt. But if throwing all your client funds in a pool and letting the first come first serve get the money, that's the wrong process to begin with. Your process was fraudulent from the start. It should have never been your process. Your process should have been what you promised clients, which is, of course, what I told Sam. And although I think Sam's probably guilty of a lot more than we covered here, I really wanted to get to this minimum viable fraud case, and I think we did get
Amen.
it. I mean, there is no sort of wiggling around the fact that he was the CEO of FTX, and all of this stuff that was bad that we proved happened at FTX. You don't have to invoke Alameda to get to this. So you can't say he didn't know because he definitely did know. And he says he knew. So the last thing I'm going to close on, and I thought it was the funniest part, was his little outburst at the end about me monopolizing his
Oh, that was pretty awesome.
I just want to respond to that, and please, I completely respect your question, but you have monopolized all of these discussions, Coffeezila. You need to let others speak, and you need to respond to what I'm saying and not grandstand as much here.
And I thought it was notable for two reasons. One, he hasn't lost his cool once in any interview. This is the first time I heard him like really crack. And I thought that was interesting, but I also thought it was interesting because it's just not true. It's totally wrong. I've talked to Sam for, I think, 30 minutes across 3 interviews total, like in total. And for context, he gave the New York Times an hour. He gave George Stephanopoulos 2 hours. I think out of everyone he's talked to, or at least of the major interviews, I've talked to him the least. So if anything, I'm efficient with my time. That's all I'm going to say. And speaking
That's
of being efficient with my
true.
time, this video is over. Lock this man up, and I'll see you later. Thanks for watching.
Fucking amazing job. That's so fucking good. Sam Bankman-Fried, though, is legitimately grating to try and listen to. God, it's so frustrating. Yeah, like he's not even close to getting like arrested, going to trial or anything. For some reason, so many outlets are still sucking his dick. It makes no sense. No sense at all. It is so backwards. So backwards. Thanks to resub Lamari. He won't ever be. Yeah, I'm losing faith that he will ever actually face justice. Thanks to the Prime Far. And the resub Fiend. Donated millions to both political parties. He's untouchable. I guess, man. I didn't believe that at first. I didn't think that would give him immunity. But holy shit. It's just such a blatant case of fraud, and everybody knows it. Yet Wall Street Journal is still printing things like, the most generous billionaire was about to save the world. Till his company collapsed unjustly, you swine. The world could have been saved if only we had let Sam Bankman-Fried continue to scam.